Well, hello, friends. Let's see if that works. I think I clicked the right thing. Hello, everybody. Welcome to SerenityOS office hours. It is Friday, and if you can hear and see me, please let me know, because I never quite trust this thing. Looks like I'm live, but you know. So yeah. Excellent. So it is Friday, and we're going to do office hours like we always do. So if you're not familiar, the format is that chat brings questions about SerenityOS or related topics, and we talk about whatever you want to talk about. If you have technical questions about the project or non-technical questions, it's all good. And if you're working on something and you're stuck, we can look into that. Whatever it is, really. So nice to see people here. There's Linus. Hello, Linus. Well, hello, Linus. Linus and I just did an interview, actually, with JetBrains. And it went up like in the last hour on the Sea Lion blog. So I'm definitely going to post that in the chat right here. Very nice. So if people want to check that out, it's been this kind of week where there's all kinds of external attention being given to SerenityOS. Like I did a demo at the Handmade Seattle conference yesterday that people maybe saw. And today we got this thing coming out, and I've got some other things lined up as well next week. And it's weird because I end up not programming, and I have to do all this other stuff that feels weird because it feels like I'm not making progress on anything. But at the same time, I know that if we can reach more people, some of those people might be interested in joining us and working on the project together with us. So I think it is worth doing that kind of stuff. It just feels really weird in the moment, focusing on interviews and publicity and stuff like that. So let's see. Red Shark Tooth 22 says, "Hi Andreas, love your work. Please tell my lazy ass to get back to work on my bachelor thesis instead of procrastinating on YouTube. Maybe that will help." Well, I definitely suggest doing your more important tasks instead of procrastinating on YouTube. I think there's probably nothing that's going to happen in the next 2 hours on this stream that will be more valuable to you personally than working on your bachelor thesis. So I strongly recommend that you invest some time in that and buy yourself some peace of mind in the future. So Mati asks, why did you not use parser generator like Yak in JS Parser? So the JS Parser is handwritten, and I think the main reason it's handwritten is because it was grown very organically, and we had a bunch of people contributing, and to a large extent, we didn't really know what we were doing when we started the JavaScript engine. I mean, you could see the very first steps of me starting the engine in that video I made about that. And then Stefan joined and added the initial skeleton of a parser. But it grew organically, but it does have a lot of nice benefits to not use a parser generator. I'm not actually sure that you could use a parser generator for it, but even if you could, that it would make it probably pretty hard to integrate stuff like syntax error checking, and also like to continue parsing even though something fails. I don't know how to do that with a parser generator. So the JS parser has a lot of interesting custom logic that happens, and maybe you could use a parser generator, I don't know. But the reason we didn't do it is because it grew organically. Let's see, Devashish read the interview. Well, it was pretty cool. Thank you. I'm glad you liked it. On the demo. Yeah, the demo at Handmade was very well received by the people at Handmade. If you didn't see it, you can watch the video from yesterday. Should be available. I don't know where exactly. I guess on their Vimeo channel and also on their Twitch. So, okay, it's not there. There's some way to watch that. I'll figure that out later. If people missed it, it was a pretty short demo, but it was well received. Let's see. Paya says, JetBrains interviewed you when you're actively building a free alternative to their product using their product. Genius. Right. So we are building C++ editing functionality into SerenityOS, but I don't think that it's really a free alternative to their product. It obviously, we only care about a very niche segment of C++ developers, like those who work on SerenityOS stuff. It's not really useful as a generic thing. But I agree that there's a sort of sweet, sweet irony to that whole thing. Firefox 317 says, can you show how to work on the AArch64 port? Did you never try that? I have never tried that, so I don't know how to do that. I will, as soon as we have something sort of demonstrable, I'll make sure to ask somebody to make a demo out of that. In fact, if somebody who's working on that is listening right now, and you could make any kind of video demo or something, I'm sure that people would find that really interesting. Caleb says the demo was fire. Well, nice, thank you. Yeah, right, so the stuff will be available afterwards. Okay, wait, let's just figure this out right now. I know it was on Abner's Twitch, so let's just find him. Damn it, it's twitch.tv/Abner Coimbra. Here we are. Right, Handmade Seattle Day 1. Right here, there is a VOD of that, so you can watch the entire thing. And I don't know where exactly we are. It's like 4 hours something into it. Let's see. So Ali says that parser generators are meh anyway. I guess I kind of agree with that. There are some benefits to writing, being able to write the language out in a less imperative form, right? Like to write something descriptive, but it's also nice to have total control of the parsing. Yeah. So Paco Power says, hello, since you do a lot of OOP stuff, how do you deal with failure in object constructors? So the pattern that we adopt in SerenityOS is that we don't want failure to be a thing in constructors. So because we don't use exceptions, so we don't really have a way to return failure. What we tend to do instead is we have these helper factory functions. And let's see if we can look at one. So like file open in the libcore library. So instead of calling the file constructor when you want to open a file, you would call this helper function called open, and it will then internally construct a file object and attempt to open the file, and then return to you the file object if the open was successful, or an error object if it was not successful. And that's sort of how we deal with construction failures, in that we simply avoid calling constructors if there would be an error. So we want our constructors to really be just dumb functions that receive all of the initial state from a factory function. But the constructors themselves don't do anything that could fail. And ideally, that should also include allocation. That's aspirational, though. We're not there yet. We do have a lot of constructors that allocate. But I would like to eventually get to a point where all allocation failures have been surfaced by the factory function, and we simply have to move all of those allocated things into the constructor. So that's aspirational. One day we're gonna get there. This is something that we're working on. And the main reason to move forward on stuff like that is to make us way more resilient in the face of memory allocation failures, right? And that's an area where our kernel is rapidly improving. User space has been lagging behind a bit because there's less incentive, obviously, to care about allocation failure in user space, because it's okay for a user space program to crash. It's more okay for a user space program to crash than it is for the kernel to crash. But recently, I have been doing a whole bunch of stuff on surfacing allocation problems in the user space. For example, introducing this new type called error, which is a template that can be returned by anybody, both in user space and kernel space. And it replaces all of our previous mechanisms we had for returning an error. So now we have the single unified thing both in user space and kernel space. And you can then use this in combination with our try macro. So let's see if we can find some use of that. So it would look something like this. So file equals, and then try to open something. And what happens here is that if this thing returns an error, then that error will simply just be propagated immediately as the return value of this function, and so on. So that whole thing is working out pretty nicely, but we have about 1 million places that we need to spread this pattern. Let's see. Could I take a look at the question asked in Discord? I don't particularly want to open Discord on stream, so I'm not going to do that. Let's see, I don't know why Stream Chat is lagging behind. And this is indeed a hefty mug. This is a Christmas mug that I picked up in the store. Has a little Santa Claus on it. And I am a big fan of Christmas. So when I saw this in the store, I thought, I gotta get that. And I'm very happy with it because it allows me to charge up two teas in one cup. Anyway, Tom French says, so the same behavior as Rust options and the question mark operator, right? That's right. This is essentially what we wanted to achieve, was have the same behavior as the question mark operator in Rust. So we have our own sort of result type, and this is our own question mark operator, since we can't get a question mark from the core language. This is the closest that we could figure out. So Linus says, question for office hours, please explain things from this pyramid. Oh, I see. This is the question from Discord, and then I should explain things from this pyramid? Uh-huh. Right. Well, I feel like it would be almost cheating if I explain everything. The point of these is that the information should be difficult to gather, right? Like if I just say what everything is, that kind of breaks the entire iceberg. So, but I guess we can look at some of them. Let's see. So I guess like this. Oh, right, yeah. So this is like the entry-level stuff that everybody knows, and then it gets progressively more obscure until you reach the bottom, where there's all these things here that people might not be familiar with. And not all of these things are real things. Whoever made this has been like memeing a little bit and adding fake entries, which makes it like, I don't know. To me, that makes it a little bit less interesting, because, at the same time, I guess it's sort of part of the meme format that it has to be a little bit over the top and silly. So let's see. Which one should we look at? I guess the Let's Play Super Metroid Part 2, right? So that one refers to, let's see if that's at the bottom there. Let me make sure I'm not obscuring it. So for April Fool's Day, not this year, but the year before, I made a silly video where I pretended that I was tired of programming and I was gonna turn my YouTube channel into a Let's Play channel instead. And I made a video where I played Super Metroid, and it was a part 1 because I found it really difficult to play and talk at the same time. And I got like halfway through the game and then I was just really tired of it. So I thought, okay, let's just cut it off here. This will be part 1. And then the next day I recorded a part 2, but it didn't go very well. I didn't play very well, and I ended up screwing up a lot, and I didn't use save points, so I lost a lot of progress, and I got like a little bit irritated with myself and my poor decisions in the gameplay. But I was recording it, so there was a part 2 to the Super Metroid Let's Play, with me becoming increasingly frustrated. But it was never uploaded anywhere, so that's what that refers to. So now we have shed some light on one of these. If people have a particular one of these that they're interested in, then we can certainly shed some light on it, but outside of that, let's just put that to rest. Let's see. Aria says that they recreated the cat dog with React.js. How can I share it with you? I guess you can link it in the chat? I don't know. So Matti says, is it possible to port Wine to SerenityOS? It's certainly possible, absolutely. But I don't know what's currently standing in the way. I know that there's a bug open about it. Right here, there's a Wine checklist. And if you're interested in this, I encourage you to go and look at this and investigate what you might be able to do to move that forward, if that's something that you care about. Johnny Cernato says, oh wait, hold on, let me not miss this one right here. Driss Do Erden says, just curiosity, is Serenity mmap shared file also more performant than standard file open read functions? I haven't measured it, so I don't know, but I would expect yes, because once you have memory mapped a file, the page fault handler is pretty straightforward. So like you access a new part of the memory mapped file that you haven't accessed before, and we have to take a page fault and fault in that page by reading it from disk. But that is substantially less work than doing lots of repeated read accesses. So I guess it depends on your access pattern, actually. So if you're doing like many small reads, like you're reading 1 byte at a time, for example, with the read syscall, mmap will definitely be faster. But if you're reading 1 page at a time, so 4 kilobytes at a time, I would expect it to be faster, but really this is something that should be measured, so I don't know. Let's see. Yeah, James already way ahead of me with the linking the Wine checklist. Johnny said, maybe this has been asked before, but what are my expectations on a proper IDE? What are the advantages of C-Line? What's Hack Studio? So my expectations of a proper IDE is being able to jump directly to a class by typing the name. So I want to be able to type in here, for example, open file description, and be able to just jump to that class, right? I also want to be able to click on a function somewhere and like the use of a function and then be taken to its declaration like that. And things like that. And I also want code completion because I love to use really long variable names. But if I had to type out the really long variable names every time, I would probably not like them as much. So code completion, like really well-working code completion. And CLion is just so much more mature than Hack Studio for sure. Hack Studio is the IDE in Serenity. And if you haven't seen it, let's just bring it up. So let's see. That would be in the develop menu, development, Hack Studio. Don't have make installed, that's fine. Right, so it's an IDE for C++ development, but of course it also supports other languages that we implement like JavaScript. But the basic idea is to make an IDE for development that we can use, and that's what it is. It is way less mature than CLion. It doesn't understand code as well as CLion does because we're building our own C++ parser to power all of this stuff. So it's something that just takes time to get right, but we're making forward progress on it. And I guess lately people have been telling me over and over and over to use multiple cursors in CLion. Like when they see me editing, they get frustrated that I don't use multi-cursor, and I am getting a little bit better at using that. So that's something that eventually I'm probably going to have to implement for our text editor in Serenity as well. But I haven't thought about how yet, but you know, how hard can it be, right? Let's see, Atlas says, many file managers are unable to make a file copy to a root directory without relaunching as root. Windows does this by elevating a process that performs the copy. This is a thing in Serenity. It is not really a thing at the moment, but the architecture is actually there to support this, most of the architecture. So when you copy files with File Manager, we're actually launching a secondary program to perform the copy. And it's a program that's called File Operation. And where is it? Right here. So it's a separated program, and what that does is that it feeds File Manager sort of progress updates, and that was very fast, as you could see. But you get this sort of status update, like how's the copy going? And I built it this way because I wanted it to be very responsive, and if something goes wrong during a copy or something operation, I don't want the file manager to crash, and I don't want the file manager to slow down or something because you're doing a copy. So it's completely delegated to a separate program that just feeds progress updates to file manager. And because we have that architecture, you could easily imagine having a way to launch one of these file operations processes with elevated privileges somehow, right? I'm not exactly sure how the privilege escalation would work, like what would be the best layering of that, but architecturally speaking, like File Manager is pretty well set up once we have a way to elevate the privileges of such a process. Paco Power says, what do you think about C++ 20 modules? Any plans to use it in Serenity, or are you sticking to an older standard? We do not stick to older standards. We stick to the bleeding edge of whatever is available in GCC and Clang. because we do use both compilers, but whatever is available in both GCC and Clang, that's the C++ that we use. So like all the latest stuff, as long as it's useful to us. Now, I haven't used C++ 20 modules yet, so I don't have an opinion about them. Let's see, Kevin says, hi Andreas and good evening everyone. Any updates or thoughts on the network applet connection status bug 6062? Let's investigate. 6062. What is that? 6062. Okay, only IP address is used to check network connection status. Wait, did I get the right? I mean, I guess that was the right bug. I don't have any updates on it. It looks like nobody had any updates on it since April. So what is the issue? So currently the network applet always shows the same icon whether it's connected or not. It would be better if we showed an icon where there's no connection, blah, blah, blah. And then what? The problem is... this is a lot of reading here. Okay. I don't really have... I haven't looked into this issue at all, but sounds like this is a bare metal concern, because right here we have an interface that is listed as not up. I don't even know what that is though. Also, why if I select something here, it gets unselected after just a moment? I guess because the data model underlying this view is updated, but that's not nice. We should fix that. Right, this thing. I don't have any thoughts on that. I have to look more closely at it later, but it looks like a mouthful. Susie Bros says, where does the infamous Tuba image come from? So there's a picture of me with a tuba, and that, I think that was taken in Oslo. I had a friend there who had a tuba, and he had a lot of silly hats, and I put on a silly hat and took a picture with a tuba. That's the basic backstory. Osamu says, will you start a new Serenity typo OS project in the future if you aren't doing? Wait, what does this mean? If you're asking if I will start a new Serenity-like operating system project in the future, no. I'm not sure why I would want to do that. I'm very happy with the project we have going on here. I don't really see a need to bootstrap a new project with the same goal. But SerenityOS is it's a pretty unusual project in many ways, because the scope of it keeps changing and keeps growing. When we discover that, oh, we should really teach it how to do this thing. So, when I started, it was very bare bones, and it has grown as we add functionality, as we discover what we would like it to do. And I'm sure that there's more functionality that we're going to add over time, obviously. So since I'm so focused on this project, I don't really feel the need to start a new separate project for any reason, when I can just expand the scope of this project to contain whatever it is that I want to do. But of course, if I woke up one day and I wanted to build, web apps or something, I would probably have to start a new project, because it really wouldn't fit into Serenity. But I feel like that's a different thing. Triangles with many exclamation points, says that they use VS Code as their C++ IDE, and it has made some great improvements over time. That is cool. It's nice that there's competition in the IDE space, I think. It is the only thing that's a bit sad in the IDE space is that all of the IDEs are really, really heavy, and they're built in really heavy ways. The least heavy IDE, I guess, is probably Qt Creator, which is the one I was using before, but it also has a lot less functionality than the heavier IDEs. So you kind of have to pay that tax when you use a high functionality IDE. Devashish says, why is it a big deal to have many idle threads in a pool? Can you give a low-level overview of what resources do they consume while doing absolutely nothing? Well, a thread that's not running is not very heavy in a well-built system, I guess. But it still uses memory resources. And also, I guess, if you put too many threads in a pool, then I imagine that you end up, like, if literally every job you put into the pool ends up on a new thread, so that there's never any reuse of a thread, then you end up eating more scheduling overhead, I would think. So, if you say that you have 10 threads and 1,000 jobs, and those 10 threads end up doing like 100 jobs each, then you're like in a situation where a thread can keep running for a while longer and just get one more job and do that one too. You don't have to pay the cost of a context switch to a different thread. Whereas if you had 1,000 threads and 1,000 jobs, every thread got one job, then you would have to pay for the context switch between these threads. So I can imagine that might be an issue, but this isn't really something that I have spent much time messing around with or thinking about. So that was just a guess from first principles. Let's see. Miles says that Linux style capabilities sound like a reasonable approach to that problem with the file manager escalation. Yeah, so capabilities are one solution. Something that we're already building in Serenity is this thing called the File System Access Server. And File System Access Server is a pretty interesting service. So it's a service that's always running, and it's used by programs like Text Editor or Pixel Paint, and anybody who wants to do file system access. They actually don't have access to the file system themselves. So now when I'm opening a file here in Text Editor, this open dialog runs in the File System Access Server. It's not part of the Text Editor program. And if I want to save to this file here, then I get a permission request dialog where this is a File System Access Server asking if I really want to allow Text Editor to write to this file. And you only have to approve it once. But basically this is a mechanism that we've been building that allows separate service program to mediate file system access. And this could also certainly be used as a building block in something like that privileged escalation for copying something to the root. That said, I'm not sure how common it is to want to copy something to the root, but I do agree that it does feel like something that would, if there is a straightforward way in the GUI to just copy something to the root and elevate your privileges temporarily to do that, I feel like that would give this feeling of quality, right? That's a really high level of polish if you can do that in a secure way. So I do like that idea. Let's see. Kevin Joseph says, really appreciate these. Thank you. Thank you for coming, Kevin. Glad to have you here. Olaru says, hi, how does the Serenity kernel get its symbols? Does it generate a symbol table file which it parses at runtime? Or does it get compiled with debug symbols and reads them from the various sections? Aha, I'll show you. So we actually generate a file, I think. Yes, here it is. It's called kernel.map. So it looks like this, basically. And it's just a sorted list of all the kernel symbols. And we generate that as part of the build process. And I think the first number here is just a hexadecimal number that contains the number of symbols in this file, so that the code in the kernel that wants to parse this thing knows exactly how many symbols to expect. So it can just read that many lines. And in the kernel, we call these ksims, and we load them on startup. Let's see. Load kernel symbols. Wait. Did this change? Did this change, I wonder? Kernel.map. Oh, shoot. Okay. So we're still using that symbol thing, but nowadays we're actually baking it into the kernel elf. So we're baking it in as a separate section. Right, and that's what we see here. So the kernel symbols is, we use some binutils trickery to jam this text file that I just showed you. We jam it into the kernel image, and then we parse them out from there. So that's, the first part here is correct. Like, we generate a symbol table file, which we then parse at runtime. It would be pretty cool to have the kernel sort of self-reflect and like read its own image. But the way that our boot process is set up right now, we don't actually load the whole kernel image into RAM. We only load the PT load sections, or the PT load headers. So if you look at the headers with readelf like this, we can see these. So we load all these load headers here, but we can't find random sections in memory. So that's why. Like, and the main elf header itself, we also can't find, I think, because it doesn't get stored anywhere. Just throw it out. Let's see. Ananta says, hello, Awesome Kling. Do you implement X3 or X4 FS and Linux compatibility capability for Serenity? It will be interesting and more useful, like using Wine, LibreOffice, and other Linux apps. So currently we implement ext2. That's a file system that we implement from the Linux world, and the one that we use as our basic root file system at the moment. I'm not interested in Linux compatibility capabilities like syscall, translation, stuff like that. I'm sure that you could build compatibility layers with that if you wanted, but if you want to run Linux apps, then you can also just use Linux. Like, we're not trying to create Linux or something Linux compatible here. We're building something different, something that fits what we're interested in. And like, I have nothing against Linux. Like, if you want to use Linux, then use Linux, but that's not what we're building. Let's see. Drist Erden says, probably a stupid question. When debug information is open at Serenity, but how much system use memory when just use terminal? I guess what you mean is, like, how much do we use, like, how much is the baseline memory usage if we boot without the GUI? it's not something I've investigated, but I encourage you to investigate that yourself. You can boot the system in text mode and get some measurements. Should be pretty straightforward. Aria says, YouTube chat doesn't let me send links. Well, I'm sure that you could come up with a crafty way to encode the links so that I could still understand how to reassemble them. If you wanted to. Lebster says, is it possible to view your demo from Handmade Seattle? Yeah, absolutely. That there should be a way to do that. We looked into it earlier. Where the hell was that? It was here on Twitch. Just go to Abner's Twitch. I linked it earlier. I'll link it again here. And yeah. So one infinitive one says, maybe disable the thing that deletes links. I have no control over that. I have no control over moderation basically on YouTube, which is, I have to say, that's something that's extremely frustrating, because I often see that I get comments and then they get deleted by YouTube. And but before they get deleted, I get a notification on my phone that like, oh, so-and-so commented on your YouTube video, and I can see the comment, but when I go there, it's been deleted. And this happens pretty often, and they're just like innocuous comments. But I think the thing that YouTube just really dislikes is if you have URLs in your comments. At least that's what I often see. Like, I get some comment and I see some part of a URL in it, and then it's deleted. And it is really frustrating. But I mean, I guess they're dealing with a lot of spam. So what do I know? I don't know how to solve a problem like that at that scale. But I would like to, I guess I would like to just say that I don't have control over deleted comments and deleted messages in the chat at all. And there are no settings I can use to improve that, as far as I know. But if I'm wrong and there's a setting somewhere, then I would be happy to hear about it. Christoph Honal says, hi, is there something like an online package repository and manager planned? There are no plans. We don't have plans in this project. And I like the ports monorepo system. I would say that's one of our greatest strengths over the more Linux-like development model. The fact that we are extremely cohesive and we stay in a single repo allows us to build with a kind of leverage that you simply don't get in a distributed project model. And that's something that I'm really happy with. And I think a large part of our ability to make fast progress on things is that everything is developed in this way. If we try to split everything up, then we would just clone a lot of the problems that traditional Linux distros have for no real reason. Let's see. Drist Erden says he meant with base GUI plus terminal. Right, yeah, but whatever configuration, like you can definitely figure that out and let us know. That would be interesting. Okay, the bit.ly hash 30h3swn. Bit.ly. Let's try it out. Look at that, we figured it out. And there is CatDog. Check it out. Can we zoom? And it works when we're zoomed. That's awesome. It feels like she's a lot faster than the native CatDog. Or a bit faster. Also, I wonder why it doesn't... Like, it gets blurry when I zoom in, but that's probably Firefox being obnoxious. I wish it would just pixelate. That's awesome. Nice job on that. Oh, CatDog. It's a little bit strange that when I move the cursor around, the cat dog comes along with it. I wish she would kind of stay in place, even if I'm moving the cursor near the cat dog. Can we try to open the React cat dog demo in the SerenityOS browser? You're gosh dang right, we're gonna try that. That's exactly what we're gonna try. And that will also give us a chance to try if Bitly works in the Serenity browser. I have no idea. So we got a bunch of things to figure out here. Bitly 30H3SWN. All right. Bitly worked. Oh no, we have a JavaScript exception. Cannot set property width of object canvas element. All right, hold on. Let's try to fix that. Cannot set property width of object canvas element. So, oh, because I've made it read-only for some reason. Oh, it shouldn't be read-only, I think. Let's double check with the spec, but I think you're supposed to be able to assign to the width property. Width is, yeah, right. It's not a read-only attribute, it's just a plain attribute. All right, so then we make that not read-only, same with height. And then we need to add some getter and setter, I guess. So those were longs or unsigned long. Wait. Ah, I have the wrong key map. Swedish key map. Everything felt so wrong. All right, let's just add these here, and let's do a little bit of that multi-cursor editing that we talked about. Maybe something like this. All right, and then set attribute string number value. Attribute. Why can't I spell attribute names colon. And then we just have to change that one. Okay. Wow. See, that multi-cursor editing is pretty handy, I have to admit. Mr. Brax says, you don't use the Swedish key map? Heck no. I use US English key map. I just have an ability to switch to Swedish key map if I need to type in Swedish, and I've been in contact with some Swedish people today, so I had to switch to a compatible key map. And by the way, I guess we can look at how this is actually, what does this actually do? Oh, this is not very view source friendly. It's gonna be fine. Let's see, Red J says, hey Andreas, I'm a bit late. Would it be possible to run something like the Chromium browser in Serenity? And if not, is that a possible plan for the future? We do not have plans for the future or even the near future. We just do whatever comes up on a daily basis. It would certainly be possible to port Chromium or Firefox or whatever browser you wanted. They are very portable things. It would be a lot of work, and in my opinion, it would be extremely uninteresting work. That's why we're building a new browser engine instead, because it's far more interesting, both like on a personal level, but also I think there are a few things the world needs less than yet another Chromium port, I think. So building a completely different browser engine seems almost virtuous in a way. So I'm definitely on that track. Let's see if we can run this if we allow assigning to those properties. Skychip says, hey, hey. Hey, hey to you too. All right, what was that URL? I already lost it. Oh no, I didn't. It's right there. Bit.ly. There's probably going to be more problems, but we'll see. All right, so we didn't get the JavaScript exception. But also nothing really happening. So I guess this doesn't work. I wonder why. I mean, it could be a million things, right? Something that maybe we should debug separately. What events is it using? Yeah, I don't know. That it's probably not terribly difficult. It takes a long. There's a fair amount of startup time when you want to debug these modern web things, just because React and things like that are so involved that there's like a million different components that interact in our browser engine on mouse move, right? So yeah, that's what I would expect, just a simple on mouse move thing, but it's not here. I guess it's in some external file. Do we send mouse move events? I wonder. Event names, mouse move. We do generate mouse move events. Yeah, we do. So, I don't know why it doesn't work, but it doesn't work at the moment. It's something that we can look into later. Let's see. Mr. Brack says, interesting. I've been programming for over a decade, always with the Swedish one. I guess it's mostly muscle memory. Right. So I programmed with the Swedish key map for many years as well, but it is just cumbersome. The way that you have to contort your fingers to hit a lot of the bracket keys and stuff like that, it's just not very ergonomic. So they've kind of sacrificed convenience to have space for the OÄ characters. And if you use US English keyboard, then there's like way less finger travel going on. And if you do the majority of your typing in English anyway, then I feel like it's a pretty fair deal. But if you have muscle memory for Swedish keyboard, then nothing wrong with holding on to that either. But I made sort of a decision to switch to US English, and I'm happy that I did, because my hands feel like they suffer less since I switched. Skychip says, boot time is absolutely insane. By the way, do you have a plan for real hardware support? I don't have a plan. In the SerenityOS project, we do not have plans. If you visit the FAQ page that's listed in the pinned comment, and also in the bottom left of the screen, you can find this FAQ here, where the answer is that I don't have a plan for anything to implement or anything to do. We're really just flying one day at a time. Let's see, Daniel San says, I liked your demo in the conference yesterday, although it felt short. Yeah, it did feel short. I tried to pack as much as possible into it, but the conference organizers were very, very serious about the time limit. Like, they said 5 minutes, and I went over. Like, my demo was like 5 minutes and 30 seconds, and they were pretty hard about it. And they said that like next year they're not going to have any kind of tolerance for anything above 5 minutes, but for this year it was like, okay, 5 minutes and 30 seconds or 6 minutes or whatever. And I wish I would have had more time for sure, because making a 5-minute demo of Serenity is way harder than making a 10 or 15-minute demo. And I would have loved to show like a lot more things. But that was the time slot that I had, so I try to make the most of it. Let's see. Hyperlonk wants a SerenityOS like GTK theme. I'm sure you can make that if you dig into it. JCS says, oh, hello, Joshua. Nice to see you here. Hey, Andreas. Are you open to talking about what your original demo plans were? Sure. So the original demo was going to be using a very popular website that is like a very heavy website. So like Twitter. And there were all these things that had to get working, like React, React DOM, CSS Flexbox, media queries, JavaScript things. There were like a million things to get working, and a lot of them did get working, and a lot of people helped out getting a lot of things working, but we were not really able to get the site looking good in time. And also the performance was pretty terrible. It took like, for example, if you tried to load my Twitter profile, it would take about 30-40 seconds before the page would finish loading, and that felt like it wouldn't make a very impressive demo if you had to wait that long. And of course, you could cheat that kind of thing with movie magic, but it was very, very slow. But the main thing that killed it was that the page layout was just not getting good enough in time. So I kind of just abandoned the whole thing, and I made the video about wanting to not be so isolated anyway. And I think part of it was that I felt really bad about isolating over this whole thing, but I also felt like it wasn't gonna get finished with a high enough quality and time. So there were kind of multiple factors that made me feel really bad. I don't know. In retrospect, the whole thing was kind of a stupid idea, because I don't want to develop this project in a kind of a silo or in secret. But I've already talked at length about that, as you know. But yeah, so that was the original plan, was to get a modern website like Twitter working. But ultimately, like, I think the demo turned out way better when it wasn't a specific thing like that, but instead more like, oh, here are some random 4 random things that you can do on Serenity, and we ended up showing off a lot more of the system that way. Let's see. Zero says, seems like the organizers were German. I don't think they are, but that is still funny to me. It seems that we have the same stereotypes about Germans. Devashish says that he did a React project quite a while back. It uses fancy web audio APIs, so it probably won't function. But the UI is pretty simple. Can we try loading it in Serenity browser? We could absolutely try it, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it would work, but send it here and we'll give it a try. Let's see, show us how Twitter looks now. So I haven't actually tried it for a while. Let me see what it looks like today. It's gonna load for a while probably. No, yeah. So as you can see, it's not like the most beautiful thing. Oh, and we crashed. Oh, look at that. Our memory usage graph just spiking up and then dying. That was one of many, many problems with this kind of thing, is that modern websites are extremely resource hungry. Twitter is no exception. They create hundreds of thousands of JavaScript objects and things like that. And you just kind of have to deal with it in your engine and sort of try to make object representation small. And we've done a bunch of optimizations in the JavaScript and web engines to try to deal with some of these things, but I don't know. It was a bit ambitious at this stage. Like we're obviously gonna get there to get this thing working, but we're gonna need to sort of flesh out and make more mature the web engine. The CSS stuff was in particular pain point that we encountered. So React-based websites or websites like Twitter, they use CSS flex box pretty heavy, so flexible boxes, and those are very convenient for developers and very tricky to implement as a browser engine, because the flexbox layout algorithm is I don't even know what the word is, but basically you have to do multiple passes of layouts in order to discover constraints. So like you can only learn which constraints apply to a box after you have laid out the inside of that box, figured out what is the intrinsic size of its content, and then you have to relay out the containing box in its parent context once you have that information, and then like that feeds you new information that you use to do the next pass of layout. So it's like this big multi-pass recursive layout thing, and I had totally underestimated how tricky it would be to get Flexbox working well enough that it could display Twitter correctly. Because you can get it working kind of in simple cases, but something that's very annoying on the web is or not annoying, but like it's a great feature of web content, is that if you don't say how wide something is, then the browser will just figure out how wide it needs to be based on how wide its content is. And that is really convenient when you're a web developer, but when you're building the browser to actually compute the dang width of things based on their content, that's the thing that makes CSS layout really tricky, in my opinion, because things can have things inside of them that have things inside of them and so on, right? Anyways, let's see. Paul Rat says it might have been okay to recorded sessions on the demo stuff without saying it's for a demo. Sure. I mean, sure. Watkins R says, "Hey Andreas, hope you're doing well." I am doing well. Thank you for asking. I hope you're doing well too. I guess that was not asking, but hoping. So thank you for hoping, and I hope you're doing well too. Let's see. Danielson says that his favorite was the kernel JSON thing. Yeah, that's something that I'm so used to that in Serenity that I kind of take it for granted. But when people see that for the first time, they tend to be like, oh, whoa, you can do that? And, you know, of course you can, because we've been doing it for so long. And I don't know, it's just so logical, and I always forget about it. And actually, before I made the demos, I spoke to JT of Systems with JT fame here on YouTube, and got the advice that that I have to think about, like, not what is cool to me about Serenity, but what is it like for somebody who sees the system for the first time? Like, what would be interesting to them? And that totally changed my perspective on what the demo should be like. So that made me go for these kind of like simple but really cool things that I've taken for granted for over a year. So it sounds like people liked it, so I'm happy with that. Let's see, Firefox says, I really like that you showed the proc file system with its JSON output and combined that with showing the JavaScript system. Yeah, so like I said, like I had 5 minutes, so I tried to jam as much functionality in there as possible. Even like I had to do a lot of functionality demo without even saying what it was, or like without calling it out. So for example, like I made sure to like right click on something in the file manager and like open it from there in the text editor, stuff like that. Or, you know, using the ability to toggle things in menus without closing the menu, things like that. So I try to pack a lot of that stuff in there so that if somebody was paying attention, then they would notice all these little details and say, wait a minute, how did he do that? Yeah, I think it turned out good. JCS says, I thought the demo came through very impressively. I was thinking a neat demo would be to boot a whole bunch of milestones in QEMU, one after another, to see how it progressed over the years. That would be super cool, actually. That is a really cool idea. I like that. Oh, I'm far behind again. Panta82 says, interesting how heavy the modern web is when you open it in a naive browser. That is really true. Yeah, there's nothing quite like building a browser from scratch to show you just how extremely heavy the contemporary web is. Like the amount of JavaScript that you have to load, that they just throw in your face, and they're like, here, load this 2 megabyte JavaScript. And don't ask why. That was some of the earliest stuff towards Twitter compatibility. Was like, they're sending us this 1.5 megabytes of JavaScript. What the heck are we gonna do? It's taking like several seconds just to parse that, where like the browser just stalls waiting for the JavaScript parser. So I had to do a bunch of optimization work on the parser. But, you know, all of that was really good stuff because it made the whole browser and JS engine better and faster. So that's something that's really nice about that particular demo, the original demo, was that all of the work that went into that was just work making the browser better. So none of it was wasted. I am happy about that. It would have been really, really sad if all that time was spent and then it was sort of just thrown aside, but instead nothing of it was wasted. Let's see. Devashish says, wait, what? Oh, here we go. This .netlify.app. Okay, let's see if we can load it here. Netlify.app. It's nice that people are sending me links in segments. We're beating the system here, communicating links even though we're not supposed to. And let's see if we can load that then. So https netlify.app. HTTP load failed. we don't have any cipher suites in common with that host, I'm afraid. So I cannot load that in Serenity. That is a TLS problem. So we're not implementing any of the cryptographic ciphers or cryptographic functions that they support on that particular server. So our TLS library is not able to speak to it. So that's unfortunate. Let's see. Clinton Programs says, do you think we would be better off without React and other modern web development trends? It seems like it has a lot of negatives, such as tracking, bloat, etc., but it also makes the web more interactive. I don't know. I don't think that we would be better off. I think that abstraction is a really powerful and useful thing, and it allows people to build more capable web applications. And like, we're able to do so much on the web these days that would have been very, very cumbersome to build if everybody had nothing but vanilla JavaScript and HTML and CSS, right? The fact that there are these really sophisticated building blocks and frameworks that people can use is a large part of why we have such a rich web. So I don't know that we would be better off. I guess one feeling that I do have is that we maybe would be better off if JavaScript hadn't been so absurdly optimized in browsers. Like the amount of compiler engineer optimization work that has gone into the major JavaScript engines like V8, JavaScript Core, and SpiderMonkey, it's just a lot, right? There's man decades of optimization effort poured into these things, and the result of that is that all of these very complex websites, they expect JavaScript to execute really, really fast. And that's nice in many ways, but like the faster you make it, the more code they throw at it. There's like that cycle, that unavoidable natural cycle, that whatever resources you give to abstraction developers, they will expand their abstractions to consume those resources. And that puts us as like an sort of underdog project, like a new browser, at a pretty heavy disadvantage, because not only do we have to support the language as specified, but if you want to actually execute code from the modern web, then you're going to have to also optimize your engine pretty aggressively. For example, or an example of that is, so the JavaScript language as specified tells you to instantiate the arguments object in every function call, right? So you call a function, and in the context of that function being called, there exists a magical object called arguments that you can access your function arguments through sort of an array-like interface. And there's the arguments object in JavaScript. And the spec says that that object always has to be allocated in every function that you call. So if you just implement JavaScript according to spec, that means that you will create this arguments object every time there's a function call. And that ends up being extremely heavy. And that was one of the many performance problems that we had on Twitter. And to alleviate that, you can sort of statically determine that, wait a minute, this function doesn't even access the arguments object. So if I create an arguments object and allocate that from the garbage collector, it will never ever get accessed. So you can just elide that allocation, right? So you just don't create the arguments object, and then you save yourself the trouble of allocating, of collecting the garbage, of using the memory, and so on. And there's a million other things like that, that all of the mature engines, of course, already do all these things, right? But if you don't do them, then you quickly discover that you're in a lot of pain. Because I think when we first had Twitter loading in the browser, it took like 3 minutes or something like that before it finished loading. And a huge chunk of that was just the garbage collector running over and over because we allocated so many arguments objects and so many declarative environment objects and things like that. And then we had to figure out ways to actually avoid creating those objects because we could statically prove that they were not needed. And I guess it would be really cool to, if you could have a documentation resource, not just of JavaScript, the language as specified, but of like optimization strategies or common optimization strategies that every engine implements, how they work, what they achieve, and sort of what problem they avoid, things like that. That would be a fascinating thing to have. And if I knew more about it, I could write some of it myself. But it's maybe someday I will know more about it so I can write it myself. Anyway, let's see. JCS says that every program attempts to expand until it can read mail. That is that is disturbing, but you have a point. I've certainly seen that happen more than once. And I feel like I haven't done that to any of my own programs, but I have definitely written programs that ended up sending mail more than once. So my programs expand until they send mail. Let's see. Panta82 says, imagine how much work Microsoft has put into Edge and IE over the years to keep up the pace of optimization, only to throw it all away. Right. That is pretty sad. I think the fact that they dropped their engine and sort of joined the Chromium crowd is really, really, really sad. And it's really not something that should be celebrated or encouraged, but quite the opposite. Like I feel like that's a really shameful thing that they did. And it's hard to argue, like it's hard to believe them when they say that they care about the web, when they had a such a capable engine that they just threw away to join another one. But I don't know. Of course, there were many pros and cons and various motivations, and I don't know what that decision looked like internally, but I do think from an external perspective, it's extremely depressing that they ended up doing that, and I wish they would have made a different decision. Let's see. Arthur says, some of my favorite videos are your performance optimization videos. You're extremely good at it, and I am not. When you worked on optimizing Safari, what tools did you use, in-house and or more? The main tool that I used for Safari was Instruments. So Instruments on Mac OS. Wait, that's not it. Instruments on Mac OS is the profiling tool, but it also has a bunch of other functionality, not just time profiles, but you can do memory analysis, page fault tracing, stuff like that. And if it looks vaguely familiar, then I've been building the SerenityOS profiler to have sort of a similar UI layout where you have the timeline track and then the tree view down below. It's totally based on the same ideas. And that's the main optimization tool that I used. And then we had all of these different benchmarks that were in-house that we would run, capture a profile of the benchmarks, and then try to work out how we could optimize execution. Let's see. Mustafa says, the camera is nice, but it looks like it's set up higher than usual. Yeah, I'm just trying out a new camera mount today, and it ended up a little bit higher than usual. I'm still experimenting with it. I only got it set up like 20 minutes before starting the stream, so didn't have too much time to adjust and mess around. Let's see. Andrew Castor bragging about having played 12 hours of Forza in the last 2 days. Great job, sir. That sounds like it might be fun then. So very cool. I was playing Dark Souls 2 in the last 2 days, and it's not very fun, I have to admit. Like I got a decent ways into the game now, and I'm not having fun. First game was super fun. This one is not very fun. So Watkinsar says, I imagine those V8 engineers probably have stuff like that in their respective corporations. Right. So a lot of knowledge about JavaScript engine optimization is stored internally at companies for sure. And also, I think it's largely like generic compiler optimizations at this point, because all of the major engines are JIT compilers, and they implement a lot of like standard compiler optimizations that you would find in other compilers too, like GCC or LLVM or whatever. So I think, but because I don't know much about compiler optimizations from an implementation perspective, I don't know how that stuff works, but maybe one day I should figure out how that works. We'll see. S. Salur says, one thing I'm wondering is why isn't an operating system dedicated to just one programming language? I mean, like game engines, can't only SerenityOS be a programming platform? For example, C++ versus what? Why an operating system is not dedicated to one programming language? I guess Serenity is probably the closest thing to that. Or there are other operating systems that have a single language, like there's Temple OS, right? That has Holy C. SerenityOS is written in C++. It's very much dedicated to that in a sense, although it is purely practical, really. Like, it is the language that I felt the most productive with when I started, and that's why we're all using it now. If there were to be something that made me feel way more productive or way more practical tomorrow, then I would look at, okay, so how can we make use of that? And I don't know, like, why you would want to really restrict yourself to one thing if there's a better tool for the job. I think that's what it comes down to. People who do heavy work tend to appreciate good tools. And the moment you tie yourself to a tool, you're kind of limiting you're putting a cap on the kind of work you can do, because there's no tool that's the best tool for every job. They're great tools, but none of them are going to be like the objectively best tool for every job. So if you tether yourself to a specific one, then you're like eternally capped. And I think that's probably why you don't see many systems like dedicated to a single language. Let's see. Christian Garcia says, what was the update of a tool that you use that you enjoyed the most in your life? Oh, that's an interesting question. The update of a tool that I use that I enjoy the most in my life. I don't know. I should keep track of that kind of thing. Like, because I frequently have this experience that I install some new version of something and I think, oh, wow, what a great change, right? But then I just forget about it. Or like I forget what the software was like before the change, and now I only remember how it's like now. But if I think back really far, like the most impactful update that I can remember was, I think, Microsoft Office 97 when I saw the toolbars, that it just made such an impact on me. I was so impressed with them that I decided to recreate that toolbar basically here. And it had this effect that like they would draw this little button outline around the button when you would hover over it. And in Office 95, they didn't do that. So that was new in Office 97. I think that was in Office 97. And I just remember being totally in awe by this super cool effect. And I still haven't let go. I still love it. The way that it just pops suddenly. It's so neat. So I guess it's like decades later and I'm still thinking about it. So that's probably the one I enjoyed the most in my life. Let's see. Patrick McGill says it's Friday again. Crazy. I agree. It is a little bit crazy. Time flies. Beige Dove says Gentoo or OpenBSD. Well, if I had to choose between those two, I would probably pick OpenBSD because I have spent enough time in my life compiling portage packages that I don't need to emerge anything anytime soon. Mustafa says, what should I have for lunch today? I'm terrible at making decisions. You should have Indian food. Arthur says, played Metroid Dread yet? Great game. I haven't played it yet. I watched a little bit of gameplay on YouTube, and I watched somebody speedrunning it on Twitch, and it looks totally all right. And I think I stopped watching people playing it because I didn't want to spoil too much. And I'm probably gonna check it out. It's just I'm in this total Dark Souls zone right now, where I'm just trying out the Dark Souls series after having such a great experience with the first one. Currently not enjoying the second one, but I'm going to play a little bit more and then move on to the third. And then I also have Bloodborne queued up. So, but Metroid Dread, I'm probably gonna play that at some point. I would like to wait for the game to get a little bit cheaper. I do like to buy cheaper things, and it's not like I'm in a hurry to play it, right? But we'll see. I feel like that's one of those things where it's quite easy to save money if I just wait to buy games instead of getting them when they're new. Because I used to buy new games all the time when they would come out. But it just feels a bit like, what's the urgency? Anyway. Chien says, hello, sir. Is your base GUI hardware accelerated? No, it is not. It is built on frame buffer bitmaps. Let's see. Patrick McGill says, firmware written in C++ would not be a good idea. Well, you could probably write some of the firmware in C++, but I wouldn't necessarily write all of it in C++. But anything you can do in C, you can definitely do better in C++. But very often you also want to use assembly in firmware. So let's see. Chien says, in my opinion, they perfected UI design in Windows 9X in 2000, but threw it all away for the sake of touch devices and DPI scaling. Yes, I agree. I do feel the same way, that they did throw it away for the sake of... they threw a lot of things away for the sake of touch devices and DPI stuff. Although I would say that happened later. I don't think that... So Windows XP was the thing that came after this, right? And I don't think that's necessarily when they started getting corrupted by touch devices. But what happened there was that they started targeting consumers very heavily. And that was sort of the catalyst that sent them on a very sad path UI design-wise, and thankfully we can choose which UI paradigms we implement here in Serenity, so we just do the ones that are the awesomest ones. Oops. Let's see, Patrick says he's getting his Friday dose of Andreas Kling ASMR. My wife is very used to the sound of your voice now too. Well, that's... that is funny. I'm surprised that people listen to this on speakers, but at the same time, why wouldn't you? I wish I had something clever to say about this, but I'm just gonna keep my mouth shut. Let's see. Mr. Brack says Nintendo games getting cheaper. Ha! Yeah, I know, but I can always hope. At least I feel like if I go and look at the what is it, the Nintendo Switch store, they do have a little bit of deals, and you just kind of have to wait for something to show up in the deals section. Escalation says, asking if you've seen the movie Her. I have not seen the movie Her. But I'm aware of it, but I haven't seen it. That's the Joaquin Phoenix movie, right? I have not seen that. Mustafa says, what is your favorite underrated conference / other talk on programming? Oh. I don't know. I don't know. Damn it. I wish I had an answer. I don't have an answer. I have to think about that. Damn it. I have to get better at recalling random things like this. Like if you ask me to recall some code thing, then it's so much easier than trying to recall something from reality. Reality is much, much harder to remember. And I have not seen Serial Experiments Lane either. All right, so Mustafa says that he has a talk that he really likes, which is a guy pretending to talk about the future of computers from 1973. Really great. Okay, so I think that you should share that with us so that we can all appreciate that. That would be very nice. Ooh, I know now which talk I wanted to show you. Oh, damn, what the heck? I follow this Greek professor guy on Twitter, but what the heck is his name again? Greek professor Unix. Diomedes Spinellis. That was easy. This guy, he has a great talk about the history of Unix, which I really, really like. Can we find that? Half a century of Unix history preservation. No, that's not the one. Unix architecture evolution from the 1970 to the 2018 FreeBSD. This was super interesting. I really, really enjoyed this talk. I will link it in the chat. And that now my brain is starting to unclog. So I also remembered the Dave Cutler interview. I really, really like these as well. The oral history of Dave Cutler, who is the guy behind the VMS operating system and the Windows NT kernel. Fantastic talk as well. Recommend both of these videos. So HPQOEU says, have you ever tried any of the BSDs or any other Unix as a desktop for a prolonged time? Sure. Yes, I have used OpenBSD, NetBSD, and FreeBSD as desktop system for a couple of months each, I think. And I've also used Mac OS, of course, as my desktop. It is technically a Unix. I used it for for years as my desktop. I've also run Solaris many years ago. I ran a Solaris desktop. Yeah, those are the ones. And, you know, they all have their strengths and weaknesses. Let's see, the future of programming. Let me just Google that so we can find it. That was a bit of an ambiguous title. I feel like there are so many of them. Let's see. Alex says, how many CPUs are in the room you are in right now? All right, the questions are getting a little silly here, but let's see. How many CPUs are in the room? I guess I would have to say 3. 3 CPUs in the room. There's a little Intel Nook computer that I used to use. I got my phone, and I got the computer that I'm streaming from. And then, of course, they have many cores inside of them and so on. Let's see. All right, so Mustafa was saying Brett Victor. The Future of Programming by Brett Victor. Let's link that. All right. Yeah, so there are obviously a lot of cool videos about programming, and I think it's good to allocate a little bit of time every week to like take in at least something new that you haven't seen before, which, you know, it can be hard, especially if you are used to sort of sticking in a routine. Like I have this problem that taking in new stuff that I'm not familiar with is kind of something I have to force myself to do, but it always feels like time well spent afterwards. And like even watching stuff like a lecture on a data structure that you haven't seen before or something like that, I think it's definitely worth doing. And this is the reason I'm saying this now is because I'm reminding myself to do that. I gotta do that soon again. Ali says, speaking of that Intel NUC, do you remember off the top of your head what its processor was? Ooh, that is a tricksy question. I don't know that I remember that off the top of my head, but I can make a little bit of a search through my archive here. I do have it on the other screen, I think. I do have a model number. All right, let's see. Let's Google it on Bing, actually. Obviously, let's go to Bing, please. We're Googling Bing, so we can go to Bing and search for this. This was the thing. Dun, dun, dun. This right here is an i3 6100U thingy. This was the computer I was using in the beginning of the SerenityOS project. This, like, my first videos were made on that thing, and my goodness, that thing would die if I try to record a video of my contemporary workflow of like using Sea Lion and building Serenity and making a video at the same time, the higher resolution and everything. That would be interesting. It's just sitting here on a shelf right now. I have nothing for it to do, and it's a little bit sad, actually. I would like to give it something to do, but what are you gonna do? I'm sure something will come up. Like this, I will eventually like spill tea or something on this computer, and I will need a replacement. So that's why I'm having it around. Let's see. Asystole says, "Hey Andreas, while we are on, have you ever used X? Have you ever run BOS?" Not much. I used it for like an hour or something, just click around, doodle around, see what the UI felt like, and it was not super interesting to me. Like, I like the icon style, but something about it just didn't appeal to me. I was a much bigger fan of Next Step system. I really liked the way that looked, so that's something I spent a bunch more time with. But even, like, I say much more time, but really not that much more time, actually. If I'm honest, I just liked it more, so it felt like I spent more time with it. What's the TLDR? Valtteri says, what's the TLDR on why EastConst is cool? Well, I advise you to read this post right here, and it explains the arguments for EastConst placement, but the quick answer is that it's the same order in which the language understands the type. So it's the natural position for the const qualifier. Andrew Castor says, now that you've done one conference and a few podcasts, are you more open to extra conferences and podcasts in the future? I guess. I mean, yeah, I think so, definitely. It's gets easier every time I do it. And yesterday when I was doing the Handmade Seattle demo, I was surprisingly nervous for a pre-recorded demo, but I was still sitting here like my stomach was turning, and like, oh, gotta answer all the questions in the Q&A. And unfortunately, like the Q&A section was not publicly visible. Like, it was only visible to conference ticket holders, and it was in text form, so I was doing it in a chat room. But it was really fun. And I think every time that I do one of these things, like conferences, podcasts, and newspaper articles, blog posts, whatever, it gets a little bit better, a little bit easier, and a little bit funner. So I'm certainly more open to it now than I've been in the past. But at the same time, I also don't want to I don't want to like oversaturate the internet with like the same things over and over, because I feel like it's good that we have some time to develop the system before I go out and talk about it again. Now it's been a while since the last time. Yeah. And by the way, one of my favorite things that happened this year is that Linus started doing a little bit of Serenity publicity as well. Not just participating in the monthly update videos, but also like going out and doing podcasts, and like today's interviewed by JetBrains on the Sea Lion blog and stuff like that. That's really awesome. I'm really happy with that, and I would love to see more people, anybody who's interested in sharing their experience of working on the project, if they would go out and talk about that in whatever appropriate forum, that would be awesome. And I really hope that there isn't somebody who feels that they really would like to, but that they shouldn't, or something like that, or that it would be frowned upon, because I would certainly encourage everybody to share your own experience with the project if you feel like it. It would just be really fun. Let's see. Mustafa says, better yet, when SerenityOS conference? Well, for when posting in my chat box, your punishment is that you have to organize the first SerenityOS conference. So, go do it. Mitchell says, Andreas, do you ever look at unknown or also homegrown operating systems? That previous BOS question made me wonder if you try to avoid them, maybe because you don't want to copy them, etc., or the opposite. I don't really look at other systems super much in general anymore, because and it's something I should do more of, really. It's just that I get kind of tunnel visioned on what I'm working on, and then I forget to go and look for inspiration. But I certainly like looking at random operating systems that people are working on. And for example, there are 2 other operating systems presenting demos at Handmade Seattle. There's Box OS by Daniel Boxer, and there's also Essence by Naxt. And I was looking at those systems, and it's really, really fun to see how other people approach these things. And they're very, very different from Serenity. And I've also in the past looked at systems like Wing OS, and there have been so many different ones, actually. Like whenever somebody says, "Oh, hey Andreas, I'm working on this operating system," I usually try to like check out the code and like build it and run it and see what it looks like, just because it's fun. So I do enjoy that, yes. And I'm not afraid to copy anybody. I mean, have you seen Serenity OS? Like, does it look like I'm afraid to copy anybody? We're literally stealing the entire visual identity. But the reason that it's okay is because the people we're stealing it from were foolish enough to discard it in favor of something way uglier. So that makes it okay, I think. Like they don't want it, we'll take it. That's my reasoning anyway. SerenityOS conference someday, yeah. So Kevin says, in C, is it true that not freeing every pointer allocated affects the runtime of the program? It may, and it may not. It really depends on many, many different factors. So if it's just a handful of pointers that you don't free, that's usually fine. But if you allocate gigabytes and gigabytes and you don't free it, the operating system is eventually going to have to put your gigabytes somewhere, because you're going to run out of RAM. And usually what happens then is that it copies those things out to disk instead. And then the disk is usually a lot slower than your RAM, so that starts to affect runtime. But if it's just a small number of allocations or a small amount of memory allocated, that's usually not an issue. But in general, it's usually a pretty good idea to free memory that you've allocated. I would suggest doing it. Devashish says, do you like Indian food? What's your favorite? I love Indian food. I super love it. My favorite food is probably palak paneer. This like spinach and paneer dish. It's a super awesome curry that I usually get whenever I'm in an Indian restaurant. And I love like all kinds of different paneer dishes, really. And when I lived in San Francisco, I used to try like every vegetarian dish in every Indian restaurant in the city. I was almost like on a mission to try all of them. And they were all awesome. And it's the one thing I would say about Indian food is that it feels to me like if I wanted to get really, really fat, the easiest way for me to do that would be to eat nothing but Indian food, because it's so stupidly good that I can just eat infinity amounts of it. And that seems dangerous, but yes, I do love it. Thank you for listening to that suddenly passionate outburst about Indian food. Let's see. I Poke Badgers with Spoon says, what is the biggest decision you regret on the design of Serenity that cost you the most pain changing? I don't know. I don't really have any answer to that. I don't regret anything in particular. I'm pretty happy with the things that we have. I think, like, obviously we've made lots of mistakes and we continue to make mistakes, but those mistakes give us learning experiences. And if it weren't for those learning experiences, we wouldn't improve as developers, and I think the system wouldn't improve either. So I don't regret screwing up designs. I'm happy that we screw them up so that we can, because the thing is, when you screw something up and you're forced to figure out how to make it better, then you actually, not only do you end up with a better thing, but you also understand what made that other thing, what made the previous design bad, right? Whereas if you just do something correctly the first time, or like the optimal way the first time, then, and if it's by accident, I mean, like you accidentally make something great the first time, that's nice and everything, but it feels so nice to understand why a flawed design is flawed, and to have that experience of like replacing it with a better design. And I think that's also why it's so important to, when you're teaching new developers, they don't just like tell them what they should do to achieve the optimal design right away, but instead like help them work through some bad designs so that they can learn from their own mistakes, like what makes this inefficient or what makes this not work well, and help them sort of iterate their way to a good design. And I like to I like to do that myself as well, like iterate and experience the iterative process that leads to the better design. Let's see. Jack Delahunt says, you never seem to be logged into your GitHub account in Firefox. Do you use a different browser off stream, or do you log out before stream? I'm not sure. I'm not sure that matters. But in the interest of a little bit of OPSEC, I'm just gonna say no comment. Retro Game Plus says, have you considered doing a video on staying motivated? I think I probably did one, at least one already. But my main feeling about motivation is that motivation is unreliable, kind of fickle, and if you build your life around motivation, then you're always at the mercy of this unreliable jerk that lives in your head, and you wake up one day and you're not motivated, and if that's what you rely on, then you can't work properly. And so I'm a big fan of making routines instead, and like learning how to be disciplined, sticking to your routines, because if you have discipline, then you don't need motivation. Then motivation is just a nice bonus on top of your discipline. So that's my short version of my opinion on motivation. Yeah, I'm sure that there's a car video about that. I feel like I've talked about that before. Now people want Indian food, yeah. Valtteri says, what is your system for maintaining focus? Do you have a mandatory minimum time of working on Serenity every day? Not really. I just, it's just, I'm very fortunate, I would say, because I am intrinsically motivated to work on Serenity, even if I have the discipline. So what I just said about discipline, like I build discipline underneath, and then I have this stupid amount of motivation on top of that. So at the moment, my system for maintaining focus is that I go and I sit at the computer every day, and I try to put in like at least, I would say, like I try to like merge at least a few PRs. I try to write maybe, I don't know, like 4 or 5 commits minimum every day. So I have some like metrics like that I like to stick to. But you know, obviously some days I don't end up writing code. Like this week I was doing interviews and conference preparation, and next week there's more interview stuff happening. And so I do, I guess, yeah, I do have this mandatory minimum time. It's just that it's not time, it's more like mandatory minimum output that I want to produce. But then on top of that, I have this stupid intrinsic motivation that just seems endless at the moment. So while I do have the mandatory minimum, I just end up doing so much more usually. But yeah, but as I said, like, motivation is unreliable. So some days it just doesn't happen, and then I do try to, I do force myself to do something anyway. Let's see. Valtteri says, it would be interesting to see a video showing your daily flow, like checking PRs, figuring out the next thing to work on, and so on. Yeah, I guess so. That does sound like it could be interesting. I would have to, I would have to observe myself to see what I actually do. Maybe keep a log or something. Or I guess I can also just record it and see what happens. But yeah, that's a good idea. Andrew Castor says, did you see the low-level emotional programming talk at Handmade Seattle yesterday? Did it resonate with you? I definitely saw myself in the bursts of extreme productivity graphs. I only saw parts of that yet because I was also doing other tasks at the same time. So I have yet to watch the whole thing. I am going to listen to the whole thing, of course. So the parts I did see, they did resonate partly. But I will reserve comment until I have seen the whole thing. I watched the first talk by Rasmus Andersson, and then I had to leave during the Happy Cat talk, so I'll have to get back to you on that. Let's see. Saeed Han says, what's something you wish more programmers knew or understood? Something I wish more programmers knew or understood. I guess that what's something? Oh, damn it. This is such a good question. Like, if I have to condense it down to one thing, I wish more people would understand how to identify what matters, right? That's such a typical mistake that so many people make. I've made that mistake hundreds of times myself, wasting a bunch of time on something irrelevant because I didn't take the extra steps to actually determine, like, what is the real impact of what I'm doing right now? Like, does this thing actually matter in the great scheme of things? I've wasted so much time on irrelevant things because I didn't, like, honestly consider if they were relevant. And you see that a lot among junior developers especially, but it's something that never really stops, and you have to consciously fight against it. And a typical thing is these, like, performance optimizations that you convince yourself you need to do because this would be more efficient if we did it this way or that way. And so much stuff like that really doesn't matter. And if you measure it, which you should, if you're doing performance work, you will find that, like, this really didn't matter, and you spent way more time on this, on just making this change than will ever be saved by the code change in terms of performance. And that's something I wish people would, I wish people would make more of an effort in honestly evaluating the impact of the things that they're working on and trying their best to choose the most impactful things. But at the same time, obviously, sometimes you want to do something just because it's fun, just because it tickles your nerd brain, right? And I'm no different. But I think it's okay to make exceptions for those cases. So, like, if you're doing something that is really, really fun for you, even though you recognize that it's kind of ultimately pointless, but you're really enjoying refactoring this thing or implementing some optimization that doesn't really matter in the great scheme of things, but it's just so darn fun to do, then you should not feel bad about doing that. Right, yeah, it's kind of about cost-benefit analysis just on a micro level as well, not just at the macro level, but like at the micro level. Like, what am I doing right now? Is this really actually beneficial? Or is this pointless optimization really fun enough that that I should spend my time on it? Yeah, that's what I think. Let's see. And Paul says, almost end of office hours. Nice chat, everyone. Thanks, Andreas. Enjoy weekend. Indeed, we are at the end of office hours. So this will be the end of today. And oh, let me just answer Fart Monster here before we go. Yes, Fart Monster. You can watch the demo on Twitch right there. It's 4 hours and something into it. So yes, this is the end of office hours. Thank you all very much for coming, for all the questions and the dialogue. Very, very nice to talk to all of you. And it's I think it's so great that we still have this format going, and it somehow it manages to feel fresh every week. So really appreciate everybody making that happen, because if you were not here, it would not be fresh every week. So that's all thanks to you. Hope everybody will have a great weekend, and I will see you all next time. Bye.